I was not the first Blackwood accused of dishonoring the uniform, but I'm the first whose worth was measured by a single word spoken in front of 300 warriors, the word that made my father's face go white and the Admiral's knees buckle. The graduation hall echoed with the kinds of sounds you hear only in places built to make and break legends. Steel boots clattering, metals clinking, the whoosh of 30 flags unfurling as the Navy band crashed into the old anthem. My breath rasped inside my chest, each inhale stinging with the memory of what the ceremony truly was, a public reckoning, a pit of lions wearing blue, and all of them hungry for blood. At my side, the ceremonial chalice trembled atop velvet. I ran my thumb across the face of my mother's locket, each line worn by years of war and waiting, her courage hidden inside, just like the fear in my own chest. Admiral Victor Hargrove moved center stage, a silver-haired monument of arrogance. I could see the old scars pulsing at his temple, his eyes already hard as granite. To him, I was no more than a rumor in the wrong uniform, a woman sent to appease paperwork, not a warrior to salute. His voice sliced the air. "Lieutenant Commander Blackwood, step forward." I took 3 strides past the pews packed with officers. My dress shoes slipped across polished marble, 100 eyes boring through my spine. Not curiosity, not respect, but something colder. From the balcony, my father's glare pinned me in place. Captain Robert Blackwood, a legend and a liar. He had spent years spitting on my ambitions, warning that women in uniform invite shame to the fleet. He watched now, waiting for my humiliation. The Admiral didn't bother with protocol. He leaned into the microphone, amplifying contempt for all to hear. "Since you studied so hard to stand among real soldiers, tell us your call sign, Lieutenant Commander." They expected me to quiver, to stumble, to choke on tradition and disgrace. Officers nudged each other, smirks blossoming like cracks through ice. The Navy band faltered. The press turned their cameras like spotlights at a firing squad. I raised my chin and searched the crowd for one honest face, but found only shadows. I remembered every hour of darkness in North Korea, every second spent holding the lives of 6 men in my hands, every moment when my mother's locket pressed into my skin for resolve. I cleared my throat, let my voice ring out so there was no escape, no doubt, no mercy. "My call sign," I said, "is Iron Widow." Hargrove's jaw slackened, the color draining from his cheeks as if the blood itself retreated from a secret only he knew. My father's lips parted, eyes wide. The room fell into brittle, perfect silence, the kind born from fear, awe, and a dawning unspoken truth. Iron Widow was a ghost, a myth among covert operatives, the shadow who saved an admiral's life in a world none of these men dared enter. In that instant, respect wasn't given. It was seized. The legend they mocked stood in the flesh before them, and it wore my name. The first salute broke the silence. A single officer, hand trembling, and then 300 arms moved as one, acknowledgement crashing down like a tide. Behind me, my father staggered in the balcony, defeated by a word. I gripped my locket, breath finally free, and let the moment wash over me. Shame burned away by honor, doubt crushed by truth, and the whole world forced to watch as a woman they scorned claimed her place, by call sign and by courage. Minnie Hook, there is a moment when every wound becomes unbearable, and a moment when the only way out is through. Childhood in the Blackwood house was not measured by bedtime stories or gentle hands. It was built on discipline, unyielding, unsparing, and razor sharp as the crease in my father's dress whites. Our family dinners were war zones. Forks clattered like rifles, words fired with the chill of medals unearned. When I was 6, I believed the world began at the tip of a sailor's boot and ended somewhere beyond the edge of our battered backyard fence. My first dream was simplicity itself. I wanted to command a fleet, to steer whole ships through storm and salt, a captain unafraid of monsters lurking beneath the waves. I built my first ship out of milk crates and string, hoisting my mother's old flower sheets as sails. She joined me on deck, her laughter sunlight in the gloom of our small Virginia house. She told stories of the Gulf War, of her time as a field nurse who patched men together so they could keep fighting. Each story she told was a kind of balm. Courage, she whispered, is choosing kindness, even when the world wants you cruel. But every adventure ended when the sound of my father's boots thudded across the porch. He'd yank the sheets from my ship, scattering dreams back into the dirt. Pipe dreams, he spat, metals rattling against his chest, are for children too weak to face real pain. Women don't stand on bridges or command fleets. They sew flags or wait at docks. My earliest memory of Captain Robert Blackwood is not of love, but of judgment. Him standing beneath the porch light, boots polished, metals gleaming, eyes cold and remote. You were born a mistake, he told me the night I asked about joining the fleet. Women don't lead warriors. They distract them. Remember that. My mother, Miriam, would clutch my shoulder and whisper words from her own war. Compassion is courage. Don't let him shape your heart. She died too young. Her locket, all that remained, was passed to me on graduation night. Her faith became the map I drew inside myself. I wrote Captain Area in secret notebooks, planned routes around the world, learned knots, practiced salutes in the shadow of the barn. Each day carried both hope and dread, her encouragement lighting my path, his scorn snapping at my heels. The years grew harder with every ambition I voiced. Navy ROTC, special warfare, leadership exams. I forbid it, he'd bark, throwing my application in the fireplace. The smell of burning paper became the scent of my dreams, acrid and relentless. At school, classmates laughed, a captain's daughter playing at soldier. At home, silence became my only answer. He made a ceremony of shame. At the town parade, he took the microphone, announcing, "She's not fit for service." The crowd laughed. I learned to hold my head steady, lips sealed, eyes bright only when he looked away. I bled for every minor infraction. Once, for refusing to back down after a drill, he crushed my mother's broken compass with his heel and said, "Direction is for men. Yours ends here." I became invisible, a shadow in my own home. Letters I wrote to the Naval Academy went unopened, then discarded. Awards I won for marksmanship were buried in the garden. When I turned 18, he signed a form disowning me as next of kin, an administrative erasure. After my mother died, grief blurred the edges of every memory and hope. There was a night, 6 months after the funeral, when I nearly gave up. I pressed her locket in both palms until it felt hot as anger, sitting on the rotting planks behind the house where he couldn't see me. The future stretched out empty. Every dream I had seemed shackled to his contempt. For hours, I considered surrendering, throwing my notebooks away, writing a letter of apology to the academy, letting myself become nothing but a shadow behind his medals. I wanted to be free from fighting, even if it meant giving up my dreams, just for a taste of something easier, quieter. But that despair did not last. In the lowest moment, I found myself whispering my mother's words. Compassion is courage. I remembered her stories, how she stood up during chaos and blood-soaked days in the Gulf, how she believed there was a power in kindness that outlasted brute force. I imagined the sea unfurling past our fence line, my ship with sails made of hope and defiance, waiting for me. I promised her beneath a bruised sky that I would not be erased, not for him, not for anyone. That was the night widow's fire was born in me, a resolve fierce enough to survive shame, rejection, and every voice determined to shrink me. I joined the Navy not to spite my father, but to honor the part of me he tried every day to destroy. Down every hallway of my life, his words pursued me. You will never be enough. Yet in the end, it was my own voice I followed, carrying my insignia beneath my sleeve, my medals beneath a folded t-shirt, my black widow pin in my pocket, and her locket pressed close to my heart. Most wounds you inherit, but the deepest ones, those are earned. Mine were carved by silence and contempt, but widow's fire meant that the only way was through. My wound was not only the cruelty of my father's words, it was the slow loss of a world where dreaming was safe, and the fight to revive it with every step forward. In that struggle, despair became resolve, and resolve became the light by which I navigated the darkest seas. The night of the extraction, time fractured with every bullet, every frantic whisper along the pipe-choked corridors of a North Korean prison. I became less a woman, more a collection of orders. If you can't save them, erase yourself. If you can, be a shadow. Beneath my uniform and years of training, I was still my mother's daughter, a hand gripped in the dark, guiding battered men toward escape. No mission brief prepared me for the moment I recognized the sixth seal. Face streaked with dirt, eyes blurry with pain. He clung to my arm, muttering, "Iron Widow, you're real?" He was Hargrove's son, the only family Admiral Victor Hargrove ever admitted to, and a legend in his own right. A symbol of privilege I'd spent years resenting. Saving him wasn't supposed to mean anything. But in that cell, stripped of rank and history, I saw only a lost, bleeding man, desperate for deliverance. When we crossed the border and staggered into the arms of American allies, adrenaline drained from my body, replaced by a hollow ache, something like pride, something darker than exhaustion. My team melted into silence, their names redacted, their stories erased. I waited for recognition that never came. The next day, Rear Admiral Evelyn Reeve summoned me to a room windowed with secrecy. She pressed a file into my hands, graduation orders, an investigation brief, and above all, the chilling directive. Reeve's words blurred with the weight of the command. Never speak of North Korea again. Never speak of the rescue. Never acknowledge you even know Hargrove's son. Her eyes flickered with both apology and authority. You are to return as if nothing happened. All records of the operation are classified. It felt less a reward, more a banishment. My sacrifice repackaged as silence. That order gutted me. To carry out the impossible, risk my life for men who'd called me unworthy, then pretend nothing mattered. Back in the glare of Coronado, the world demanded I bury the truth. A shiver ran through me at the contrast. Hargrove, cold and imperious, would never know I carried his son from hell. My own father, relentless in contempt, would never want me to save anyone, let alone the legacy of a rival. For nights, I replayed the moment Hargrove's son clung to my hand. I thought of the men I'd grown to respect, of the blood and courage that equalized all differences. I wondered if Hargrove would treat me differently if he knew, or if he'd grow colder still. The pain was not in the danger. It was in the mandate to vanish, to fake it, to march in uniform beneath unseeing eyes. My accomplishment rendered invisible, my worth measured only in secrecy. But that bitterness rekindled the old widow's fire inside me. I drew strength from my mother's courage, from every defiant moment I'd fought through shame and erasure. If the world wished to ignore what I'd done, I'd let my silence shout louder than truth. I was the ghost that would haunt the dreams of the powerful. And as I folded Reeve's orders and returned to the open hostility of Coronado, I knew there was only one way forward. Endure and wait, gather evidence, and when the time came, reveal it all. Not for praise or validation, but for justice, and the hope that no woman would ever have to disappear for heroism again. Graduation week at Coronado was supposed to be my vindication, a place where warriors are finally welcomed into the fold and old wounds sewn shut by cheering crowds. For me, it was a gauntlet of humiliation, an arena where every test was sharpened by contempt, not camaraderie. My false identity, thin veneer over the truth, put me in the crosshairs of senior officers. Admiral Hargrove, in particular, seemed to sharpen his tongue solely for me. Publicly, he reduced my achievements to quotas and accidents. Privately, in review meetings, he forced me to repeat drills beyond exhaustion, questioned my orders, snickered at my field work. He made a display of undermining me, stringing out the rumor that I had only returned to fix a paperwork error. Each insult, each derisive glance, landed heavier than the last. I was told to stand at the back during briefings, denied access to critical files, and forced to listen to jokes about women who play war. Some nights, I cleaned the shooting range alone, repeating my mother's mantra beneath my breath just to survive the echoing jeers. My plan was simple, brutal. Endure. I would outlast every slight, every moment designed to break my confidence, and wait. Wait for evidence, for the truth lurking behind the corruption, for the moment Hargrove would slip amid his arrogance, and I could expose him for what he was. Rear Admiral Evelyn Reeve was my sole confidant, letting slip hints of support amid the haze of adversity. Her quiet guidance convinced me to trust the chain of command but not surrender my voice. Humiliation became my armor, not my undoing. I let my dignity simmer in silence, keeping the black widow pin close beneath my uniform collar. I took notes, compiled evidence, trusted that the circles I moved in, no matter how hostile, would eventually unravel Hargrove's secrets. Every insult tempted defiance. Every put-down begged me to fight back with anger. But my training, my years in the shadows, taught me the power of patience. Pride has its own schedule. I would let Hargrove believe he had won, until the world learned what kind of leader a woman like me could truly become. So I waited. I endured. And in every sleepless night, as my father's voice echoed over Hargrove's jeers, I recommitted to my plan. The reckoning would not come with a gunshot, but with truth spoken aloud in the one hall Hargrove could not control. And I would not let his shame rob me of courage. Not ever again. Graduation week at Coronado was supposed to be my vindication, a place where warriors are finally welcomed into the fold and old wounds sewn shut by cheering crowds. For me, it was a gauntlet of humiliation, an arena where every test was sharpened by contempt, not camaraderie. My false identity, thin veneer over the truth, put me in the crosshairs of senior officers. Admiral Hargrove, in particular, seemed to sharpen his tongue solely for me. Publicly, he reduced my achievements to quotas and accidents. Privately, in review meetings, he forced me to repeat drills beyond exhaustion, questioned my orders, snickered at my field work. He made a display of undermining me, stringing out the rumor that I had only returned to fix a paperwork error. Each insult, each derisive glance, landed heavier than the last. I was told to stand at the back during briefings, denied access to critical files, and forced to listen to jokes about women who play war. Some nights, I cleaned the shooting range alone, repeating my mother's mantra beneath my breath just to survive the echoing jeers. My plan was simple, brutal. Endure. I would outlast every slight, every moment designed to break my confidence, and wait. Wait for evidence, for the truth lurking behind the corruption, for the moment Hargrove would slip amid his arrogance, and I could expose him for what he was, Rear Admiral Evelyn Reeve was my sole confidant, letting slip hints of support amid the haze of adversity. Her quiet guidance convinced me to trust the chain of command, but not surrender my voice. Humiliation became my armor, not my undoing. I let my dignity simmer in silence, keeping the black widow pin close beneath my uniform collar. I took notes, compiled evidence, trusted that the circles I moved in, no matter how hostile, would eventually unravel Hargrove's secrets. Every insult tempted defiance, every put-down begged me to fight back with anger. But my training, my years in the shadows, taught me the power of patience. Pride has its own schedule. I would let Hargrove believe he had won, until the world learned what kind of leader a woman like me could truly become. So I waited. I endured, and in every sleepless night, as my father's voice echoed over Hargrove's jeers, I recommitted to my plan. The reckoning would not come with a gunshot, but with truth spoken aloud in the one hall Hargrove could not control. And I would not let his shame rob me of courage. Not ever again. The day of reckoning arrived draped in brilliance reserved for legends. Coronado's grand hall packed with officers, banners, and press. I walked the aisle with my mother's locket beating against my chest, the black widow pin pressed to my palm, every step a summary of survival. Admiral Hargrove, the architect of humiliation, stood framed by flags, expecting one last spectacle at my expense. His eyes glinted with the satisfaction of power, a man so certain of his place that he didn't bother to hide his contempt. He called me to the microphone with a voice that could break steel. Lieutenant Commander Blackwood, step forward for a call sign recognition. I obeyed, all the history of wounds moving in my shadow. The tension in the room was a living thing. Tell this assembly your call sign, Lieutenant Commander, he repeated, voice a razor. You wish us to salute you. Let us hear the name you think you've earned. My reply was calm, deceptively so. My call sign is Iron Widow. Ko? The words rang through the air, and the world seemed to freeze. The crowd waited. Hargrove's smile twitched, the corners of his mouth twitching in disbelief. He glanced aside as if searching for someone to break the spell. Then he faltered. His hand, always steady for decades, began to shake on the podium. He gripped it harder, knuckles whitening, sweat visible on his temple even beneath the spotlights. He took a step backwards, nearly stumbling, eyes fixed on me with something between terror and awe. For a moment, Hargrove looked not like an admiral, but a man haunted by the ghosts of his own decisions, his failure exposed in front of his fleet. In that charged silence, nothing happened for a long, aching heartbeat. No one moved. Officers stared. My father's jaw slackened. The press, for once, did not snap pictures. They simply watched, stunned. For the first time in my life, I saw humility crack through Hargrove's armor. It was not the color draining from his face, but the collapse of years of control. He blinked rapidly, mouth opening and shutting as if to muster denial, but no words came. The crowd saw him truly, fallible, defeated by truth. Only then, in that hush thick as velvet, did the first salute break the quiet. One officer raised his hand, then another. Still, the room did not erupt. It was reverent, sacred. The sound of hundreds rising in unity built, slow and powerful. The salutes multiplied, each movement a ripple in the ocean of silence. I locked eyes with Hargrove as the final wave of recognition rolled over us. The applause and salutes did not feel triumphant. They felt like the exhaling of history, the overdue release of justice. Rear Admiral Evelyn Reeve stepped forward, placed a hand on my shoulder and whispered, "There's finally nothing he can do." It was only then the eruption came. All at once, the officers voiced their respect, honor replacing shame in every corner of the hall. The press cameras began to flash, but could not capture the hush that preceded the flood. My father stood frozen, pride and regret fighting across his face. Hargrove stumbled to his seat, defeated, searching the floor as if meaning had dropped from his hands. I remained on stage for a moment, tears blurring banners and memories, letting the silence lean in, letting the world see that victory does not always roar. Sometimes it stands steadfast. Sometimes it breaks a villain simply by staying true. And in the stillness before the storm, my legacy, Iron Widow, became undeniable. The sound of salutes and applause lingered long after the last note of the anthem faded. I stepped down from the stage into a world transformed, not bustling with arrogance, but fragile, uncertain, respectful in a way that went beyond protocol. Officers clustered in the aisles, some waiting to shake my hand, others lingering in the shadow of what had just unfolded. I walked among them, feeling myself neither larger than life nor invisible, but utterly and finally real. Admiral Hargrove sat hunched at the edge of the stage, his hand pressed to his brow, the crisp lines of authority softened now to exhaustion. For years, I'd imagined this moment as a storm, a room split by fury, shame, and vindication. And yet, the aftermath was quieter, more profound, a tide receding to reveal the hidden bruises beneath the surf. Rear Admiral Evelyn Reeve met me in the back corridor, her eyes rimmed by sleepless nights and the kind of pride that doesn't need words. She handed me the packet, documents, testimony, files once shrouded in secrecy. Her voice was low, but every syllable was a lifeline. I wish it hadn't taken this long. The truth was always yours. I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. We stood in the corridor, a line of sunlight falling between us, bleach clean and golden on the navy tiles. I thought I'd feel triumphant, I admitted, but all I want is quiet, a place where I'm not fighting, to exist for once, without defending my own right to breathe. Reeve smiled, squeezing my shoulder. There's only pride now, nothing left to prove. She pressed the black widow pin into my palm, her own gesture of passing the torch. You gave this back to the world, she said. Make sure it's never kept in silence again. I walked past the gathering of junior officers, some faces wet with tears, the others bold with defiance, young women and men who saw in the ceremony more than tradition, but possibility. It was a new language forming in that hall, courage uttered with every handshake, every thank you for saving my brother, and I never thought I'd see a woman do what you did. Yet among all voices, my thoughts kept drifting to my father, not the cartoon of cruelty, but the man who now watched me for the first time with uncertain, haunted eyes. The following morning, the sun crept across Coronado like it was learning my name for the first time. I walked the palm-lined road toward the hospital, my dress whites crisp, my heart restless, battleground shifting beneath the uniform. The crowd's applause was mere echo now. What remained was the last unfinished war, the room where approval was still a question. My father's room was sparingly lit, panels of navy sheets drawn, the hum of medical machinery filling the silence. He lay propped against pillows, hands trembling for the first time not with rage, but with age. I closed the door gently and sat. For long minutes, neither of us spoke. I traced my mother's locket with one thumb, waiting for the shape of my courage to catch up with the moment. He stared at the ceiling, lines on his face etched deeper by a lifetime of regrets. I saw you last night, he said finally, voice split by both pride and ache. The whole damn hall saw you, I nodded. I didn't do it for them. Art, you did it for her, he guessed, voice as brittle as old parchment. And maybe for yourself. I let that truth settle. I did it to be free, or free from shame, free from your fears, he grimaced. I didn't want you to fail. I wanted you strong. Maybe I made you too strong. No, Dad, I said quietly. You tried to control what strong looked like, but you never understood what it felt like for me. Not until now. My words trembled, bared around the edges by all the years we'd never spoken. He laughed, a weak sound. Guess I couldn't stop you. Not when you finally burned through me. Burned all the way out. I reached for his hand, the first honest gesture since childhood. Our palms met, his grip fading into mine, the peace in the touch raw but familiar. I always wanted you to see me, as myself, not your echo. He brushed tears from his eyes, the gesture rough, almost ashamed. I do now. I do. I told him about North Korea, about how saving Hargrove's son had been a choice, an act of compassion, not rivalry. I spoke of rooms full of commanders who never knew my name, and the feeling of erasure after heroism. He listened, and for once, the silence was not punishment but shelter, a place where old wounds could heal, if only by inches. I'm proud of you, Arya, he said, not for medals, for not giving up. My voice shook. Thank you. But I won't live for your pride anymore. I'll carry my own. We sat together as the sun sank, sharing space emptied of expectation, remade of truth. After leaving the hospital, I made the long drive north, away from base, away from anyone who might mistake me for legend or disappointment. At a windswept shore, I traced the steps of my childhood, sand cold between my toes, the sea a riot of memory and possibility. I knelt beside my mother's weathered grave, shell-shaped stones framing faded letters. The broken cardboard compass lay buried beneath the willow. I brushed away earth until the old dial turned once in the sunlight, a reminder of all the lost directions now found. My mind flooded with flashbacks, her laughter in the garden, cramming poems and stories into my heart, her locket pressing courage where there was only fear. I did it, I whispered, voice trembling. I survived. I gave kindness where you taught strength, a compassion when the world asked for hate. I placed the black widow pin atop her gravestone, an offering to the generations before me, those who had carried more than anyone could see. The wind tugged at my uniform, at my hair, at every doubt I'd ever held. My mother's words drifted through the air. Let your heart be the needle. For the first time, I felt the world expand instead of shrink. The days that followed were gentle, found in quiet conversations with fellow women on the base, in shared stories, mentorship, whispered confidences that would have never happened before. The legacy of Iron Widow became a secret password among the initiates, a signal that surviving is sometimes more monumental than conquering. Press interviews cycled through, but I gave few answers, instead writing letters to new recruits, telling them about the fire that survives only when you refuse to forget who you are. I visited Hargrove's son in rehab, watching as he learned to walk without pain. He saluted me, not as a subordinate, but as someone who had learned the value of humility. Thank you for the second chance, he said. I shook my head. The world's full of them, if we make them ourselves. On the evening of my transfer to a new assignment, one chosen for me, not demanded, I stood at the edge of Coronado's pier. The stars stretched wide and empty overhead, no longer signs of loneliness but of endless possibility. I fingered my mother's locket, the compass, the old ceremonial chalice engraved and ready for use by someone else. I let the weight of legacy rest, not heavy, but grounding. I was at peace with every scar, every gap in understanding. I turned to the horizon, to the legacy I would leave for the next woman who dared to speak her truth in the face of power. My voice, finally quiet, bore no more apology. I walked back toward base, not as myth or shame, but as a woman who had survived, thrived, and forgiven. If you believe that true strength means rising above those who doubt you, standing tall when the world wants you silent, and choosing courage against every shadow. Subscribe now for more stories of honor, justice, and redemption. Your journey matters. Let these stories remind you that every scar can become a symbol, and every challenge can forge a new legacy. Subscribe to discover more courage, one story at a time.